What is up, wrestling fans? It is that time of the week for the Fanlight Zone Wrestling Team to talk all things pro wrestling and call it right down the middle. That's right, it's time for this week's edition of 607 TWS, The Wrestling Show, powered by FanlightZone.com. And we are here on the Fanlight Zone YouTube, Twitch, and X, of course. I am your host. My name is Rich, and joining me in the co-pilot chair as she does each and every week, she is the guru of cosplay. She is the hunter of the Pokemans because she's got to catch them all. But most importantly, because of this show, she is a pro grappling connoisseur. It is the one and only First Lady of Fanlight Zone, Miss Sammy. How are you this week?
I'm doing well. And, I realized something this week. I was talking with a friend and was talking about the show and of course, putting you over as we do. And he mentioned you never do cosplay on the show, though. And I'm like, well, it doesn't really make sense. It's a wrestling show. And he's like, no, you got to find a way to add it. So audience, have found a way to introduce cosplay of the show. So, Rich, are you ready to see my cosplay tonight?
I am ready.
All right. You are cursed.
And just so happens I am wearing a Danhausen shirt tonight.
Very timely.
little, and we not planned that out, which is even better. But yeah, it's been a heck of a week. Obviously, the editor-in-chief is taking the night off. He's got a lot of hard work, behind the scenes that he has to do. You never know when he's going to pop back in, but we also have a lot of wrestling action to talk about and go over, so I don't want to waste too much time, but I do want to implore everybody to go over to the place that powers us right above my head there. There is a QR code. That'll take you over to fanlightzone.com. It is comic books and pop culture. Go check out some of the comic book articles, wrestling articles. There's a ton of stuff over there, more stuff being added as we grow and as we continue at fanlightzone.com. So check out more and more of what's going on over there. And of course, I would also like to implore you to follow us on the social medias, including Twitch and X, which if you're not watching on YouTube, you're obviously watching over there. And make sure you follow us there because you can get all the really cool stuff that we put up and video reviews and such. And of course, make sure if you're at the YouTube channel, you're already there. But after the show, if you're watching us on X or Twitch, head on over to the Fanlight Zone YouTube channel, smash the subscribe button, click the bell icon for notifications, and of course, tap that thumbs up to let the algorithm know that you want more content from Fanlight Zone and of course, wrestling content as well. So there you go. Let's get this out of the way because we got a big week of pro wrestling to talk about. As a matter of fact, when isn't it a big week of pro wrestling to talk about? We got big shows back to back to back to back. I mean,
it's time of year. It's time of the year.
If you think about it, because we're going to talk about later in the show, we are going to be breaking down NXT Stand and Deliver. They moved it off of WrestleMania weekend. We'll be talking about that then, so I'm going to save it for that. But that is coming up this Saturday. Next Sunday is, of course, AEW's Dynasty, which we will be talking about the build to that in the start of the show here. And last but certainly not least, the week after that is the Saturday and Sunday after is WrestleMania 42. So huge 3 weeks in a row. The two big, technically NXT is part of WWE, but the two biggest companies, WWE and AEW in the world I should say in the States, because I don't know, maybe the world. Definitely WWE in the world. AEW, I don't know where their ranking is, but it doesn't really matter. But for this show, we have a lot of things going down. A lot of things. But let's start with All Elite Wrestling, because why the hell not? They had a big return last night and on, of course, Dynamite. And that, of course, is Chris Jericho has returned to All Elite Wrestling. He is back in the fold. We were talking about will he or not. Won't he go to WWE? Is he going to stay in AEW? We now know that he is All Elite again. I know we're going to probably talk about a similar thing here. So I'm going to give the floor to you. I'm going to be a gentleman and give the floor to you first. Your thoughts on the return to AEW of Chris Jericho?
I think you mean Chris Judas.
Chris Judas. Yes, Chris Judas.
It's interesting. A couple of months ago, everyone across the board was speculating he would be in the Royal Rumble. He'd be back in WWE. But as time went on, we learned more, and his contract was apparently, put on suspension as he was touring the world with Fozzy and other creative endeavors that Chris Jericho does. And time was added on. Time was frozen, so he still has time left in the contract. So if you have a Chris Jericho, enough time has passed where I think AEW can do something with him. I guess my biggest question is A, what are you going to do with him? Because he is still, a main name in their company in terms of brand name value. And number two, how much time does he really have left in AEW? I mean, if his contract was put on a hold, how much service time does he have left? Will this truly be the end of Jericho? Is this his last hurrah, or will this be, does his time there, and then he does make the jump to the E and does some sort of a final leg there? I mean, there's a lot of questions. We didn't really get much except that he's back, got a nice ovation to the hometown crowd for him, and he looks amazing. But we've kind of seen that he's big on social media, so we knew he was in good shape. I would assume he could still go. I mean, we know he can't do what he did 25 years ago, but towards the end of where he was at before, he could still kind of hang with them in the ring. And, so we'll see. I mean, we'll see. At the end of the day, he's a brand name, and enough time has passed where I think the audience wants him. And if you do the right thing with him, he can help AEW, and he can't negatively impact it unless you do the wrong thing with him, of course.
I'm going to start by saying, listen, I'm going to talk about the business first, business aspect, money, dollars. I know people hate talking about this in wrestling for some reason, but when you're talking dollars and cents with Chris Jericho, makes perfect sense in all the, he is a name recognized person, not just in professional wrestling, but outside the world of professional wrestling. Chris Jericho in many ways is transcended, maybe not transcended to the level of like The Rock or a Batista or a John Cena, but he's still transcended. Fozzy is a known band. There's people who are fans of Fozzy, believe it or not, who are not wrestling fans. I know some people don't think that, he has done some film, he has done some television. So he is a known, he's a known commodity. Chris Jericho has done a very good job, especially with the Talk is Jericho podcast, of like branding himself out, not just in the ring, if you will. So, and he's always done a great job of reinventing himself. So from the standpoint of business, him coming back, he'll reinvent himself. He'll be able to make some money. He'll be selling some t-shirts. And of course, this also works great for outside advertisers because he is a name value recognized person. For the longest time, he was the biggest name recognized person in AEW. You could still argue to this day he is. And that's not taking shots at anybody else, but who else has transcended wrestling in the company currently? Depending on fields, Kenny Omega, you could say in the video gaming world, but that's not mainstream. You know what I mean? Obviously Jon Moxley, but mostly Jon Moxley's stuff is in the wrestling world. There's not a lot of his, I understand he's done some guest spots here and there, but nothing to the level of a Chris Jericho or any of the people we named. And that's respectfully, that has nothing, it's not shade at anybody. I'm just saying from a dollars and cents, having a guy who you can go to advertisers with and is a known commodity is always going to be great for the bottom line. Now let's go to the wrestling side of things. I am with you 110%. I do believe Chris Jericho can still go. Can he go? Am I foolish enough to say he can do what he did 20 years ago? Absolutely not. Okay. However, we have seen, especially in big match situations, even up until he went away to go with Fozzy, he was still delivering in big match situations. You can put him in there in a feud, and he's going to get the feud over because he's good on the microphone. He's good at his gimmick. But also when it's time to go in the ring, he's going to be able to hold his own. We've seen him in the past couple years have some great matches with Bandito. We saw him have a great match with Will Ospreay. We've seen him have, so it's not like he can't have great matches, and he's had some great feuds as well. So yes, on that aspect. However, the fans, the sickos in particular, last night was a great response, and you're going to get that response when a guy comes back. And you're going to get that response with Jericho for two reasons. A, he's coming back and he's a big name, so you're going to pop for him when he first comes back. That would happen in any company, anywhere. Just check the tape, check the records. It always happens. Am I wrong?
No, you're correct.
Two, though. The second reason is, especially for the sickos, you get to thumb your nose at WWE and say, ha, he didn't go there. We still got him. However, how long does that last for? Because the problem wasn't Jericho's in-ring performance, and the problem wasn't Jericho's storyline performance per se. The fans were tired of seeing him on TV because they feel like he's taking time from their favorite wrestlers. And I agree to an extent. However, once and again, from dollars and cents, it makes sense. So now, how long will this honeymoon period with, and I'm using the sickos as not a term of insult, it's a term of endearment. They call themselves that, right? And I to an extent am a sicko as well. I just happen to watch all wrestling and not just AEW. But will that ravenous fan base 2 months from now, 3 months from now, 4 months from now, still be accepting of Chris Jericho? Now, you can combat this by making him an attraction and not there every week.
Yeah.
And that's what I would personally do if I'm Tony Khan. Bring him in, have him do storylines, but have him off TV a lot. Why? Because you don't need him on TV right now to pop a rating. You just need him to put over the big events and the big shows. Do I need him in a world title match? No, I'm not saying you can't. You could do a program between him and MJF. There is a long story between him and MJF. So I wouldn't be offended if they did that, right? However, I don't think he needs to be the focal point. I think if you can do that, then the sickos will not openly boo him, and not for being a heel. Openly boo him because they're tired of seeing him on TV. Remember, the signs around the arena about telling Jericho to go away. And I get it. The learning tree gimmick was him just eating that up. And somewhere on a gimmick level, that was great. And on a performer level, and probably him being a dickhead in real life, which is awesome, you had to be eaten up. Because as somebody who is also identifies as a dickhead at times, I would be eating it up if I could get people that mad at me.
Well, I think you also brought up a fair point, though, that we can expand upon a little bit, because this is not just an AEW issue. This is a WWE issue as well. Mm-hmm. Jericho's been there. This is what, year 6 right now? Are we at, or even longer at this point? He's been there.
He's been there a long time.
He's been there since basically day one.
Day one. He's a day one guy.
Right. He's a day one guy, and he's also kind of feuded with everyone on that roster. And this is a WWE problem as well. When you have these tenured guys, which can be a good thing, but it also it goes into the notion of people being locked up to, instead of 3-year deals, 5-year deals. The rosters become a little stale. You don't get as much movement. So who can he come back and work with at a high level that he hasn't already done something with? And you mentioned MJF. I think you could do it, but that audience has already seen it. Will they be okay with that, or will they be looking for something new? And is there enough new? And again, this isn't just an AEW problem. This is the AEW and WWE problem, because of the financial aspect of the business. Of, if you want to attract talent, you need to pay top dollar, and sometimes that involves years. Which, from a wrestler standpoint, a wrestler loves that, but from a creativity standpoint, it can cause a little bit of heartache and headache, because you work with this guy, you work with this guy, you go work with this guy, and it's like, well, I'm still here for 2 more years, and I've kind of worked with all the people.
I agree to an extent. New is good, fresh is good to an extent, but there's also, if you can tell a really good story, it doesn't matter. Like, ain't nobody's gonna complain if you do, like perfect example on that channel. Ain't nobody can complain if they pivot to Kenny Omega versus Will Ospreay. As a matter of fact, we all want to see that rubber match, right? Nobody's going to complain if they go back to MJF versus Will Ospreay. Nobody's going to complain eventually when it does happen and we go back to Hangman versus Swerve, because that's got to happen again. Why? Because you can't have that much great chemistry and that much of a great rivalry and never revisit it. You have to remember, once you're entwined with each other, if you come back to it, think about how many times Ric Flair and Sting did a program together. Mm-hmm. A lot. The difference is you separate it out. Speaking of Chris Jericho, a perfect example, and I know it's from the other company, Chris Jericho and Shawn Michaels have a great feud. And why? Because you would put them together, and then they'd be apart from each other for a good period of time. And then you would put them back together, and then people would, instantly go, oh, I loved it when it happened last time, and I love what they're doing now. As long as you can keep the actual feud fresh and relevant, and as you give it enough time in between, people will not complain. As a matter of fact, people will beg to see it. I mean, we've seen that time and time again. But the problem, and I agree with you, Sammy, and this is what to be, I think this is an issue for the old, I hate saying old because it's not, the company's not been around that long, AEW style. Remember, AEW for a while was not telling great stories. We have to be honest about that. Yeah. We've been talking about it. In this last year, they have hit this stride of giving great stories and having stories on different levels of the show. Not just that main event story, but the undercard has stories. And so now focusing on that, this is kind of almost a breath of fresh air for a Chris Jericho, who is a storyteller, that you can put him in there with a couple of the young guys that he may have done a small program with in the past where the storyline was kind of at best, and now get a real good storyline. Because like we've seen, I honestly in his time there, the really only great like feud storyline that we saw, in my opinion, with Jericho, not saying the only great stuff, but the only great feud one was him and MJF. It was a complete story. And
Right.
that's why I said now you can go to it from a different aspect. Now you can actually go from it where Jericho is the heel and MJF is the face, or vice versa. You can actually change it up a little bit because the two of them do such good work back and forth. You can paint a lot of gray. But like outside of that, like think a lot of his feuds, most of them weren't even about the feuds. It was about either, you know, the Jericho Appreciation Society or, you know, like all of that stuff, like his groups. And it wasn't more of a one-on-one kind of feud. So I feel like you still have some really great stories you can tell with some of the talent he's already touched, but there is some young talent there that he has not mixed it up with yet. So I'm not saying that I want him to, the problem is I don't necessarily want him to go out there and put the young guys over like that. I want him to go out there and get the next guys, the guys that are in that high mid-card, early peaking into the main event scene. I want him to get those guys over so they're solid main eventers. You know what I mean? I want to see him go out there and he's the gateway to get, I'm just using a name. I'm just throwing one out there. I'm not trying to, I want to see him get a Daniel Garcia to that next level. You know what I mean? I know that they've done stuff before, but can he get him to the next level? I want to see him, you know, take maybe, you know, some other young talent and get them to that next level. You know, one that comes to mind right now, and we'll talk about him in a minute here when we talk about the build to Dynasty, is an Andrade El Idolo. I think you could build Andrade. Andrade's been being built up a lot nicer, but I think a guy like Chris Jericho can take him successfully to the next level. And I would like to see that more than him just mix it up with fresh faces, because as the elder statesman, I think at this point in juncture, we got to also protect him. You know, like he can't be out there taking the crazy bumps. Honestly,
you know, there was reports of a trademark filing by Chris Jericho for Cornerstone as a word, a phrase, a name, but that to me screams more working towards the top of the card than the bottom. I think that's the type of thing you would throw in a Will Ospreay's face, you would throw in an Andrade's face or a Kenny Omega. I think more of that. Obviously, you could play it up with the lower end of the card as well to help build that up. Like I'm the guy. So you could say I see it both ways, but I feel like after the amount of time Jericho has been there, and we saw him at the tippity top and then kind of just, I think it's time to be back towards that top of the card. Because again, this very well is probably the end. He's 55 years old. I mean, how much more gas does he really have in the tank? And he clearly looks healthy. He looks amazing. We talked about him getting one last kind of final top, not necessarily, again, we don't need him to be champion, but that top of the card run in WWE. And let's see that here in AEW. Again, he doesn't need the belt, but let's see him in those high profile matches.
And to touch on it, I like the Cornerstone name because you can use it for everything. Because I feel like we talk about our pillars, we talk about the franchise, we talk about, you know, the MVP, but the Cornerstone is the piece, the first piece down, and he was that first major piece, and you can spin that in a couple different ways, including saying, hey, because I was that first major piece, if you want to succeed, you have to get through me. Because I'm the gatekeeper. And it's kind of like a gatekeeper thing. I like it though. I like it in the aspect because you can do that as a face or a heel. You know, that's a very Chris Jericho kind of thing. So I think it's a big bucket to win business wise. I think that, believe it or not, in the ring, it's a big bucket to win if used properly. I just think that there's some pause. I think that the sickos might not exactly be excited for him if you shove them down into their throats again. I don't think that that's going to work again. I don't think you're going to be able to pull a learning tree.
So what's your percentage on him eventually going back to the E? Where are you at on that?
That's a rough one. It's a rough one because I feel like he wants to be an AEW because he feels, I think that Cornerstone stuff is not just a gimmick. I feel like he feels like he's a very important piece to the puzzle. However, I have to say, legacy wise, why wouldn't he want to be in the Hall of Fame? And there is a way to do both. You know what I mean? And we've seen crazier things happen and we keep talking about how crazier things have happened. Both the companies have seemed to kind of like taking a step back from being at each other's throats constantly. And so you never know. I'm never saying never. And there's always that possibility that, he can finish up his in-ring career in AEW and then go over and just, basically enter the Hall of Fame and maybe do some appearances. And if you want to have him have a last match there, he can. Or, basically get choked out by Gunther, let's be honest. Because at this point in juncture, that's how everybody goes out, right? Am I wrong? That's how everybody goes out?
That's a fair topic. We should talk about another point with Gunther and how many more people he should retire. But I guess for me, I'm still greater than 50%, but not significantly higher.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if he does make a return to the E, it would be nothing more than a Goldberg style retirement, which is fine. I think they handled everything leading up to it, pretty well. I think the match was okay, and then everything afterwards clearly wasn't good for Goldberg. And
I mean,
he's made his comments about it. Yeah,
right.
He's made his comments about it. So, but either way, I'm leaning more towards that, and I'm still greater than 50%.
The problem with Bill Goldberg, just to put beyond the record about this, the problem with Bill Goldberg is his sense of what he means to the pro wrestling as a whole is greater than what it is. And I'm not saying he doesn't mean anything. I'm not saying that he's not a Hall of Famer. I'm not saying that he's not a legend. I'm just saying that he thinks that he's, and I know this is going to be, I'm doing this for last, but for realsies too. He thinks he's Bret the Hitman Hart. At the end of the day, yes, Bret might be the old man on the lawn, angry fisting at the point at everything, as he is definitely for the comic book fans, he is the Alan Moore of pro wrestling, and they'll get that. However, at the end of the day, he's also one of the best in-ring technicians to ever do it as well. So like you have to, and I think Goldberg thinks of himself in that class. Goldberg thinks of himself in the class with somebody we'll talk about in a little bit, Shawn Michaels. He thinks about himself in that class with even like a John Cena or a Randy Orton. I don't think he is. I don't even think he's in the same class as The Rock. And nothing against him. It's not a slight. It's just that's why after he did his retirement, anybody else would have been happy with that. I mean, I think Chris Jericho was actually open about how Bill Goldberg had no reason to complain. He said that on his podcast. Like, if they give you this whole like going out and shebang, and here you are, you can shut up. Are you upset that they didn't give you time to talk on the microphone to the live home audience? Come on. Not everybody gets a speech. John Cena didn't get that. He got the celebration in the ring, but he didn't cut a promo, AJ Styles, he did it weeks later, but he didn't get it the night he got retired.
It's interesting. I know we're getting off topic here, but it is kind of interesting how these guys are all legacy names, John Cena, Goldberg, and AJ Styles, and they're all retired a little bit differently. Goldberg got to retire on live over-the-air TV. So yeah, he didn't get to do a speech because TV time, NBC, they cut him off and all that. But at the end of the day, you got to retire in front of everyone. All these other guys were kind of behind some sort of a paywall or this or that. Like, you got to retire on live TV. So
yeah, I agree. So yeah, let's not get off track too much because it's a jam-packed show, but that's my feelings there. But I think I if you're talking about percentage of Jericho probably going in the Hall of Fame, I don't know about another WWE run, but I do think he'll go into the WWE Hall of Fame. I do think it's like 95%. I know there's a lot to say about his relationship with Triple H, but at the end of the day, we've seen Triple H point at a lot of guys who we never thought he would point at. And I think Triple H, if you really, no, he's making all the monies, and that's why the stacks of money that Danhausen is bringing is a reason he's getting pointed at. I will say this: the reason that he would do it is at the end of the day, there has to be a respect, whether they personally like each other or not. There's got to be respect there. So I think that trumps everything, in my opinion. But let's focus on what's coming up, because I did mention we have some big shows, and we're going to be talking about Stand and Deliver later. But next weekend we have AEW Dynasty coming to you Sunday, April 12th from Vancouver, British Columbia. It is their next pay-per-view. And we have been very, very critical in the past of sometimes the builds to AEW pay-per-views. And then we got Revolution. And we've said that the cards that we got coming into Revolution were great, but Revolution hit the stride. It had the storytelling, it had everything, and the build was perfect. And I understand they had a longer line for that. This is a short turnaround. And I think that there's the things that are troubling me is that we are now literally a week from Sunday away. And we've only got 4 matches listed. So as of right now, officially, I'm on the AEW's website. Officially, what we have listed now is the AEW World Tag Team Championships on the line is the FTR defend against Cope and Cage. We have Jon Moxley versus Will Ospreay. We have Andrade El Idolo versus Darby Allin. And if Allin wins, he will get a future shot at the AEW World Championship. And then we have the AEW World Championship match, MJF versus Kenny Omega. Now, granted, I understand we are going to add a women's world championship match. We know that Tekla will be defending the title. We are going to add a lot. There's a lot that we're going to add. I'm just saying, is it alarming? Are you alarmed knowing what we've talked about in the past, Sammy, and knowing what the build to Revolution was and how well that went and how well we praised that? Are you a little alarmed that here we are a little over a week away from a pay-per-view and we got 4 matches when you know they're going to come between pre-show and post-show somewhere between 10 to 13?
A little bit. It's a lot to jam pack into the next couple of episodes of Dynamite and Collision. And of course they're going to do it. They'll do it and they'll make it work. But it's a little disheartening after seeing such strong booking. And again, it's not that the booking's been bad. It's just the strong storytelling and some of these matches that are already announced are off strong storytelling. So it's just a little disheartening to see. It's just kind of that old AEW, like bad habits, bad behavior. It feels like that just kind of creeping in. TV's still been good. Dynamite was still good, so it's a lot of work left to do to really get people hyped about this card. And I think what we've seen AEW that's been more successful is removing that last minute hype and getting that card out earlier. So there's just more time to build it up, more time to just get people really invested in it versus here it is at the last minute, buy the pay-per-view Sunday, and you're really kind of locking it down on the Dynamite before. I just don't think that works well. And I think they've done it long enough where they should know it doesn't really work well.
I mean, the good news here, and we were talking about this before, the good news is there's a big gap between, not a gigantic gap, but a bigger gap between Dynasty and Double or Nothing. So we're going to get another big gap, and I like that. I think that that when they have a good enough time to build, they have now proven that they can. And I think Revolution should be their template. Not saying that they can't go above or it was the greatest pay-per-view, but I think like the template should be there for what they can build. Especially because when we talked about the recap of it, the show still was a little long because of what time it went on and because it was a Sunday. But if you think about it, they were concise. Like that pay-per-view was over within 4.5 hours. It was under 4.5 hours long. And that's amazing that they got everything on pace. And I felt like they paced the show. And I understand your gripe when we were talking about Revolution that it still was on a Sunday and it still didn't end until 12:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I get that. And you're all valid points. But you have to admit that pay-per-view, if it was done 6 months ago, would have ended at 1:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on a Sunday.
Yes.
So they and also they would have added in all this nonsense in between and had some really odd vignettes or like talking spots that they didn't have. And they didn't have that at Revolution. It was very crisp. It was very boom, boom, boom. Next match. I mean, hell, I praise them. They went from the women's grudge match there right into Moxley and Takeshita. It was seamless. Like as Ronda Rousey did her thing and her and Marina Shafir were leaving, Moxley's music was hitting and he was coming to the ring and high-fiving them as he got to the ring because they're part of his group. So it was to me, I was like, oh wow, amazing job in pacing. And so I have faith in them doing that, but it's just like I want a little more here. Like they've got some good stuff. I feel like Andrade and Darby has been thrown together, in my opinion. And that's kind of sad because I think the trajectory for Andrade has been really good. And not to mention Darby Allin is a pillar all day, right? He's somebody who's over. MJF and Kenny Omega, I think the build's been great. I thought that their segment on Dynamite really is driving it home. I think that MJF doing MJF things and bringing up, the diverticulitis and everything that's happened with Kenny Omega was perfect. Because why wouldn't MJF do that, right? And then obviously the tag match, the build to that is the build to that. FTR and Cope and Cage are the storyline's there. Them returning,
right.
We're off to the races. And if it gets us Cope and Cage versus the Young Bucks at some point in juncture, I think it's all worth it, right? So I like it, but I would like to see a little more focus, especially after Revolution, when we got a real hardcore focus on the women's division, which has been absolutely dominant in AEW as of late. Absolutely dominant. I would say their women's tag division is the gold standard for a women's tag team division. And I would dare say that when we were talking about the women's division as an afterthought, it is now very much not an afterthought. And think about it. They're doing that without Mercedes Moné. They're doing that with very little Toni Storm, because she's been kind of not on the back burner, but she's been doing not main event, I shouldn't say quality, because she's been doing quality work, main event level stuff. She's been in her grudge match with Marina Shafir, and that's taking a back seat. Well, Tekla has now made a star. Chris Statlander has now been a star. Willow Nightingale is now a major star. So you're building these stars, and at the same time, I think that chef's kiss, they're doing a great job. Continue to do that. But it makes me disheartened when we're a little over a week away and I don't know who the AEW Women's World Champion is fighting. I mean, we could speculate, obviously. But it's not official. It's not officially set in stone who the Women's World Champion is fighting. And I think that that's what people are interested in. We want to know who Tekla's fighting. She has now earned the respect of wrestling fans, even the people who didn't know her, and they're waiting for the next banger from her. And that's a good place to be. As a company, it's a bad place to be when we're like, as the kids would say. But somewhere I just annoyed a bunch some parents when their kids saw me. But I think overall we are. I think it's going to be fine overall. I'm just a little hesitant.
Yeah, it's just I like that bad behavior, Yep.
Yes. Speaking of bad behaviors, we have to have a segue. And this person knows all about bad behaviors, and he knows all about redemption. Oh, well, no, not you. I said this guy, not this lady. I didn't say this lady. This guy knows all about bad behaviors and redemption, and also knows something or one or two about being the best wrestler in the world for any given time, and considered to be on most people's goats and Mount Rushmores. And that, of course, is the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels. You know him as Chef Michaels down in NXT now. But we are getting a brand new documentary coming to the Peacock, The Heartbreak Kid Becoming Shawn Michaels. It will debut on Monday, April 13th. So mark that in your calendars. A little over a week away. We're going to get to see from the start of the career all the way to the man who runs NXT. We have had Shawn Michaels documentaries in the past, but they're promising we are going to get new footage. They're promising we're going to get new parts of the story that we might have not been privy to before. So it looks like, and listen, if any judgment has been made by the Peacock documentaries we've gotten leading up to this, they've done a very excellent job with those Peacock documentaries. So, Sammy, I'm asking you, are you excited to see the new Shawn Michaels documentary on April 13th?
That's the problem, is I do love Shawn Michaels. I do love the Heartbreak Kid, and I will be watching this, but are we really going to learn anything new? Are we going to really, really learn anything new? Like significantly impactful learning of anything new? I don't know.
I think so for now.
Yeah.
Like modern. I think we'll learn something new from him being in NXT.
Yeah, and that is cool, but like as much as I love hearing about the Montreal Screwjob, I love hearing about all the backstage drama that Shawn Michaels was a big part of. I love hearing the stories about, him walking into Vince's office with a clump of hair that Brett ripped out of him. I mean, those stories are fun, but we've heard them all. At this point, can any of those guys truly remember new ones that we haven't heard before, if they're even real? Because again, at the end of the day, a lot of this stuff, you kind of overinflate, over-exaggerate them. But I do love Shawn Michaels. He's certainly someone worthy of this type of treatment. I'm interested to see who else participates in it. Normally, they try and get those clips and interviews with other people, which can be kind of fun to get that different insight. I wonder if they get Bret Hart involved in any sort of way. I mean, he's still in WWE's, they're still partners in some shape, way, or form sometimes. I don't know. Either way, I think it's cool. I think it's interesting. I think you're right. I think we'll learn more about him, where he's at now versus what he was doing, in his career.
So what I'm hoping they do. Okay, so I don't have any. We only have the teases they sent in the press release. it's not a lot because they obviously want to keep it subverted. You know what I mean? They don't want to.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. I'm with you. I'm a huge Shawn Michaels fan. I'm going to watch this regardless. Okay. Even if it is the same stuff that we've had regurgitated a million times, I'm still going to watch it. I'm still going to be entertained because at the end of the day, I've made it very public is that he's one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. When he retired, I have no problem telling you, I didn't bawl, but I did cry. There was tears coming down my face because you feel like his retirement speech, he did say about how for some reason he connected with the people at home. And that was true of, as a child growing up, I went from my favorite wrestler being, we'll be honest, I grew up in the age of Hulk Hogan. So my favorite wrestler was Hulk Hogan. As I started to appreciate wrestling more, my favorite wrestler became the Macho Man Randy Savage. And then my favorite wrestler became Shawn Michaels. Then I started discovering Japanese wrestling, and my favorite wrestler became Keiji Muto, or the Great Muta, if you will, and amongst other, and in blast. But it's still, it's still real to me, damn it. You know what I mean? As far as Shawn Michaels. So I'm fine with it. But my hopes is, and we'll see, is that lately when they've been doing these Peacock documentaries, they have been going back and finding footage that they've never shown before, which leads to telling it. And they also like to tell things ever since Unreal that are all behind the scenes. So I would be curious to see, and I hope this is how it goes down. Instead of telling the stories we've all heard, why don't we get some footage of him coaching these young kids and really focus on NXT and what he's doing there and intertwine that almost, it's kind of going to sound weird, intertwine it almost like Last Dance style with going back in history to what he was thinking and what the backstage footage shows of, like, maybe him versus Chris Jericho, maybe him versus Kurt Angle. I know Chris Jericho's a little because of not being there, but you know what I mean? I'm thinking about things like that. Or even if you have some of that footage from way back, not the tantalizing stuff, not the clumps of hair, but it would be interesting to see him and Bret Hart putting their match together at WrestleMania 12. You know what I mean? Like, if they have any footage of that is something like that. And then how that relates to how he is now coaching the next generation to doing things. And we've seen his hands. I mean, the big one obviously was when Ethan Page won the title by getting knocked out on top of somebody. Like, that was an old school book job that Shawn Michaels pulled out as a trick, and it works. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I think that, like, hey, can we explore why he pitched that? Can we explore, if you do things like that? I think this is going to be a great documentary. If you rehash the stories, I'm still going to enjoy it and watch it, but yeah, it's just going to be, and I'm hoping, because like I said, in the Peacock documentaries, they tend to go behind the scenes quite a bit. Like not like behind the scenes, this is what, but actually here's the footage. Remember they did the WrestleMania 9 one. They've done the Cody Rhodes, the American Nightmare one, where they really went behind and talking about it. So they've done a bunch of them like that. So I'm hoping that's what we get there. You know what I mean? More of that Unreal style, if you will. Now let's switch gears because it's going down. We know it's coming up. Once again, we're on that final countdown, Miss Sammy. We're on the final countdown. We're a little over 2 weeks away from WrestleMania 42 as they reinvade Las Vegas, Nevada for the second year in a row. And now that we're going to do that, we do have some big amounts. By the way, 12 matches. I don't know if you do this, Sammy. There is officially 12 matches listed so far for WrestleMania's Night 1 and 2, and I don't think they're quite done yet. But I do want to start, before we talk about, obviously, the ever-changing Jokerfication, if you will, of, and I made that word up, of CM Punk, which I will end with. Let's talk about some of the matches they've added for the undercard. We were talking about how WrestleMania needed a strong undercard, and I think they're starting to really give us that strong undercard. Because, Sammy, this is what's been added this week. I'm going to list them all, and then we're going to talk about them. This week alone, they have added officially Penta defending the WWE Intercontinental Championship in a 5-way ladder match. The other 4 participants will be Javon Evans, Dragon Lee, JD McDonough, and Rusev. There will also now be a fatal 4-way tag team match for the WWE Women's Tag Team Championship, where the Irresistible Forces, Nia Jackson, Lash Legend, will defend against Charlotte Flair and Alexa Bliss, Bayley and Lyra Valkyria, and the Bella Twins, Nikki and Brie. And the bigger one, I guess, we were all wondering where both of these guys would fall at WrestleMania after a lot of injuries and a lot of speculation. Seth frickin' Rollins, who is cleared, will be taking on Gunther at WrestleMania. Talk about a great main event anywhere in the world kind of match. So those 3 matches were the ones that were added on paper. Obviously, if you go back a little bit, they did add Jacob Fatu and Drew McIntyre, but that wasn't this week. That was last week. And then, of course, we already know about the other matches. So just from what they've added and built up, what are your thoughts on the undercard of WrestleMania 42?
I mean, the undercard from a match standpoint is looking really strong, really phenomenal. The card overall from, matching and, is going to be really fun. I guess the Gunther Seth, it'll be interesting to see how they flesh that out in a storyline standpoint of why these two are going at each other. I mean, at the end of the day, the match is going to be awesome, but I do want to know why we're going that direction. So I'm intrigued by that. And there's enough time to kind of really make it strong enough. There's not a ton of time left, but there's enough because most of these other things have kind of told more than enough story. So you probably don't even really need to do another CM Punk Roman Reigns segment. I want another one, but you don't even really need to do another one. You could just pivot and start trying to really fill out some story on this other stuff. So overall, the card really has shaped up. So we'll see. We're on the home stretch now, so we'll see what happens.
I will say this. I think that they did a good job. I think they've done a great job of the 4-way tag team match for the women's tag team championships. I think they've really built that up. We all anticipated it because they've done a good job of building it up over the last month, with intertwining all these teams and, everything happening. I think they did a good job there. The Penta stuff, I don't think you needed a story for this. It was a great way to get Penta into a ladder match, which he is very proficient in, and also making an exciting match for WrestleMania. You need exciting matches. I don't think you get any more exciting. It does set up for some younger talent to get over. Javon Evans is in this match. We're looking at Javon Evans. You're looking at Dragon Lee. I understand he's not super young, but he is younger to the WWE universe. And then, of course, JD McDonough, who is, believe it or not, still young. I know everybody thinks because of his gigantic head that he is older, but he is actually he's a young man. And it's going to say Rusev is probably the oldest person in this match, which is fine. Him or Penta, which is fine though, because you need the Bruiser to be at the base for those guys to do some big spots, because you have a lot of guys who are going to do a lot of big spots in that match. I am with you on the Gunther Seth tip a little bit. However, there's 2 easy peasy lemon squeezy storylines that you could tell that you don't need a lot for. Firstly, obviously, you could say that Paul Heyman has hired Gunther. Not that he's a member of the Vision, just Gunther's kind of a missionary, a mercenary. Sorry, I said missionary. He's kind of a mercenary. He's a mercenary. He goes out there and he's just trying to etch his belt. And he has become now saddled, and this kind of ties into both these storylines that I got. He has now become saddled with a guy who ends people's careers. He is the career ender. But, well, that's awesome and cool. That doesn't make you at the top of the card. That doesn't make you the top guy. That doesn't make you champion. Beating Seth Rollins does. Mm-hmm. So maybe, even with Paul Heyman's not involved, which I think he will be, I think there's going to be a mercenary part to it with him. I think the overall story is, hey, it's nice that I retired these guys. And and don't get me wrong, I'm going to retire more guys. All your favorites, I'm going to retire them all. However, I'm also building a legacy of my own. And that's taken a back seat for a while. You have this guy. You have Seth Rollins, top tier guy, a Mr. WrestleMania type. Let's be honest. He shows up and shows out at WrestleMania. If I can beat him, that puts me right back in top contention for the World Heavyweight Championship or the WWE Championship, whichever I choose, wherever I may land, especially the World Heavyweight Championship, because right now you have CM Punk and Roman Reigns. One of them is going to walk out of WrestleMania with that belt. Both of them are tied to Seth Rollins. A victory over Seth Rollins instantly puts you in a feud, or a possible feud and possible title fight with whoever is the world champion coming out of WrestleMania. Because it's by process of proximity. Seth Rollins is definitely tied to Roman Reigns. He's definitely tied to CM Punk. And the rivalry is there. So if you can beat him, Same thing for Seth, though. The good part on the Seth end is Seth has been out injured again. We were in the vision. He was doing the heel thing. Once again, he came back, and coming back, as we said, like Jericho, you're going to get the pop. They understood that. They understood the assignment. They make him a face. A big win here gets him back on the road to where you need him back in that main event picture. Because yes, we like to have new, fresh faces, but you still have to have the guys who can be the top of the card. And Seth Rollins is one of those guys. And eventually you're going to have Braun Breaker back, and it writes itself. Because you have to have the Seth Rollins Braun Breaker match eventually, a feud. And that will elevate Braun Breaker yet another level, no matter what. So I think that they are setup wise. Maybe the story is like, right? But if you think about the long term after the fact, I think that it makes sense. It's just a good way. And also you're taking two of the guys that we were wondering who they were going to fight. And we're getting them in a match against each other, which kills two birds with one stone. And it's also two guys who, let's be honest, are great at what they do.
You know, it puts wrestling in an interesting position, because we had talked about, Gunther has to have a match, right? Because he's Gunther, and we didn't have a clue what he was going to do. But it's like he had to have a match, and he had to win it because of where he's at. I don't think he does anymore. I think he could lose to Seth, and then he could go on to his next feud where maybe he retires somebody else. There's always someone. And then when he does retire that next person, he could claim he's ready for a main event feud. And then what's the first promo you're going to say? Well, you beat up a commentator, and then you retired an old man Goldberg, old man Cena, old man AJ. And then when you had to go up against someone, Seth Rollins, you got your butt kicked. So what you had to do? You had to go retire someone else. That makes for interesting storytelling. I guess the key thing is who does he go retire next? Because it's not Jericho.
Rey Mysterio.
Could be Ray.
They were Ray to retire. Because allegedly they were setting up. Well, I don't necessarily want him to, but it's he's already talking about hanging it up. The thing about it, he's been injury prone for a long time. I think it's
what does he hang up? His mask or his boots?
Well, you leave the mask in the ring. You take.
He's already been
off,
demasked, right? So.
Right, exactly. We know what he looks like under the mask, which is fine. But that is the ultimate honor. Usually, when luchadors retire, not every luchador, but a lot of luchadors, when they retire, they take their mask off. Because it's the homage. And also in if you're going into luchadors, just a little, not going too far off the range here, luchadors usually pass that on. Mm-hmm. That's why you have multiple of the same named luchador, because they pass their lineage, they pass the mask on to the next generation. I know we just got a new Black Tiger mask I just saw. But La Parca is back. Originally he was El Hijo de La Parca, but now he's La Parca. It's like, so it makes sense, and it's something that is tradition. That's how Rey Mysterio was Rey Mysterio Jr., and now he is Rey Mysterio. You know what I mean? It's just natural progression, and obviously Rey won't be passing the mantle to Dominic. Dominic's already made a name for himself.
He channeled his real father.
Right. All kidding aside, though, he's actually gotten over. Yes, the Mysterio name is still there, but he doesn't have to be Rey Mysterio Jr. You know what I mean? To get over, and that's really actually what he would have been, or he would have been El Hijo de Rey Mysterio, if you go by most of the how it works. And that's not a shot against anybody, because once again, you can have an amazing career. A lot of guys came down from a lineage, and in a lineage that was passed to them. So, and once again, Rey Mysterio, his dad wasn't the original Rey Mysterio, it was his uncle. So it even in that way. So I think that still could be the writing on the wall. And I like what you're pitching, though. I like the fact that if you do that and you retire a Rey, or you retire somebody else, I'm just throwing that out as the name. And then you come back out. Then you could have Seth Rollins come back out and be like, hey, listen, yeah, that's nice. You beat a bunch of guys who, you didn't beat in their prime. I beat all those guys in their prime or close to their prime. And guess what? I beat you. I beat you at WrestleMania. So what do you got? What do you got? And we all anticipate Gunther retiring Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam. So you do have that in between. You could build it all up and just go to SummerSlam, and then after SummerSlam say, I'm serious. Now I beat the attraction, yada, yada, yada. It writes itself. Before we do go and talk about NXT, because that's where we're closing with, because they have a huge PLE, if you will, coming up. I do want to get your thoughts. We got another chapter in Roman and Punk, and I know we were beating this drum, but let's be honest. It is the main event of WrestleMania, the night 2 main event of WrestleMania, and rightfully so. And they have delivered one hell of a story that is really hearkening the fact that as Ken M said last week, and I'm saying again here, the comic book fan that is CM Punk is really reveling in this Joker-esque character that he's becoming in this rivalry, in this feud. And we got to see him get a little bit of revenge on Roman Reigns and then maniacally laugh after he got his revenge. Once again, I know we're sold on it, Sammy, but I want to ask you again, the thing I asked you a couple weeks ago, I think I asked you last week, the thing I asked you a month ago, we asked Ken M, and we keep saying it. Is this finally the ceiling? And can this get any better of a build to the main event of WrestleMania?
I think it can. And I think there's like one little more piece of the puzzle left. And we saw the Usos, lose the titles. So where do they kind of move back into this? Are we moving back into a bloodline? Or are we going to see that kind of reform in some sort of a way? Because now Roman, he got kind of what was coming to him after going after Punk, going after Punk with family. And obviously Punk was antagonizing him because, that's his name. He's a punk. So I guess that could be like the one last piece of the puzzle is like, are we seeing a bloodline reunion? Are we going there?
I'm going to say
I don't
no.
know.
I know it's a
not.
little early. I like what you're going with. I think we're going to see the bloodline story continue, but a little different, because I think what we saw a couple weeks ago in that great performance by Roman Reigns that we talked about last week on the show was we saw Jey Uso barking orders at Roman Reigns. And doing it with his real name, Joe. Show him what we do. Go get him. Go beat his ass. But he was barking orders at the tribal chief, which would be a big no-no a little while ago. So I think, honestly, and I know I'm getting ahead of ourselves, we'll be talking about WrestleMania. I don't want to dive too deep in the weeds, but I'm thinking the writing on the wall is the Usos, Jey specifically, is going to try to get involved at WrestleMania. Roman is going to tell him no, because Punk has done a good job of being like, you have to have your young boys to take me out. But remember, Roman, you're my young boy. I like how he played that this week with his whole, you pissed me off when you called me old, because my young boy doesn't get to call me old. And I was like, ooh, like he's just disrespecting the hell out of it. But he's also put that doubt in his head. And I think that's what he's laughing about. He's put the doubt in his head that, oh yeah, you need people. So when the chips are on the line and Jey Uso tries to interfere, Roman's going to send him away. And that's when, shortly thereafter, Roman will slip on the banana peel. Punk will walk out the winner. But what happens after?
Mm-hmm.
I think Jey Uso beats down Roman Reigns, whether that's at Mania or if it's on the Raw after. I think Jey and then probably Jimmy and maybe somebody else will take out Roman Reigns. And why? Because couldn't get the job done.
Held them back before in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. And then the things that you taught us, the ruthlessness, all that, how we destroy people, you turned your back on. That's what cost you. So screw you, and you're not the tribal chief. And I think that writes itself. And then you go a couple different ways there, because now Roman's back off TV, which, he deserves to be an attraction. I've always said that. He's back off of television. You'll bring him back for the big show, whether it's Money in the Bank where he makes his return, SummerSlam match with him and Jey Uso, which will be big business.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? That'll be a big match. And in between, Jey Uso can get a shot at CM Punk, keeping that story going while you do other things. And I think it's perfect. You hit the ground running and you set yourself up to do some things and build some things. Once again, they have been creatively bankrupt, so I can see them fumbling that, but that is kind of my logical way of saying there is a way around all this.
Yeah, there's a universe out there, right? There's a universe out there where Roman wins with Jimmy and Jay's help, and Paul Heyman comes out, and we just run it back. It could happen.
And that could happen.
But it could.
By the way, but here's the thing. That is exactly the creative bankruptcy that we're talking about. That's how that would happen. It's going, oh yeah, we're just going to do the bloodline again. Anyways, I digress. Let's talk about some of the young talent, because before we get to WrestleMania, before we get to AEW Dynasty, first up this weekend on Saturday, we get to NXT Stand and Deliver from St. Louis, Missouri. And by the way, I love that it's coming to us from the factory at the district, because if you know anything about independent wrestling, the factory is where a lot of great wrestling companies have wrestled. I love the fact that NXT has tried to keep some kind of a tie to the indies and the youth movement by doing these in these venues. I love how AEW also uses these venues because it's very smart, in my opinion. But that is where we're coming.
Yeah, just before we get started, though, I just want everyone to point out on YouTube in the US, YouTube. Make sure you guys
it's YouTube
remember
in the US.
That.
Thank you.
Yes.
I was going to get to that, but it is YouTube in the US. It is on YouTube. As a matter of fact, let me put the graphic back up. Netflix is internationally and streaming on YouTube, and it is at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, just so everybody knows. So yes, it is not on the Peacock. It is on YouTube if you are in the US, which they've been using the WWE YouTube channel great lately, especially with using it for AAA. It's worthwhile to make sure you're paying attention over there. Anyways, all right, let's break down the card though. That's what we're here for. So we're going to start off with a pre-show match. By the way, it's a 10-person mixed tag team extravaganza. It will be broadcast as a pre-show match. We have Hank and Tank tagging with Shiloh Hill, EK Prosper, and Ren Sinclair to take on the Birthright, Lexis King, Channing Stacks Lorenzo, Charlie Dempsey, Uriah Connors, and of course, the TNA Knockouts champion, Ariana Grace. Sammy, who do you think is going to win this 10-person extravaganza?
Oh, I don't even know here, but I'd like to see a big win for Lexis King and team there. Like, I'd like to see him get a pinfall victory. That'd be kind of cool.
Interesting. You know what? I would like to see the same, but I think we're going to get the Birthright winning because they've been building up the Birthright pretty good. I kind of dig that gimmick. Well, everybody but Stacks, who is a second-generation wrestler. Everybody, or well, at least second. Some of them are third generation, but there you go. All right. Next up on the main card we're headed to now, we have the NXT Tag Team Championships on the line. I forgot who was Tag Team Champions even recently, but your NXT Tag Team Champions, the Vanity Project, Brad Baylor and Ricky Smokes. They will have Jackson Drake in their corner. Will be taking on Los Americanos, Bravo Americano, and Rayo Americano, with the not real El Grande Americano in their corner. So NXT titles here. I think the smart move is to put the titles on the Americanos. Why? Because why the hell not? Like I said, I even forgot who the tag champs were. Your pick, Sammy.
Steve. I agree. Let's give the Americanos a belt. It just helps keep that storyline keep going because it is fun. It is a very fun storyline.
Abso-freaking-lutely. Next up, we have the NXT North American Championship on the line. By the way, it's been a while since we've seen the actual men's North American Championship defended on a PLE, and here we go. Your champion, Miles Bourne, defending against the man who just returned to NXT. You could call him Mr. NXT, although we also call him Mr. Wrestling, Johnny Gargano. Listen, this is Johnny Wrestling back at NXT where he does some of his best work. Miles Bourne, no slouch himself, has made a name for himself in and out of the ring. If you know, you know. Salute to Miles Bourne. But Sammy, who do you think's leaving St. Louis as the NXT North American champion?
I think it goes to Johnny Gargano because I think he's down there for very specific reasons, and I think we get a title change here.
I am going to agree with you and say and still, but I think the reason Johnny Gargano is down there is to get over Miles Bourne. Miles Bourne has all the intangibles, just needs to put them together. A big-time feud with Johnny Gargano will help him put together those little pieces he still needs. And the best way to do that is have Gargano go over so then Miles can chase for the title and we have some back and forth. I agree with you. So I'm going to say Johnny Gargano, but I think the bigger picture is to get Miles Bourne over. I know some people will be like, well, then why doesn't he just win? Because a feud with Johnny Gargano is better than just one match with Johnny Gargano. Once again, creative bankruptcy could end it the other way. We are going to now talk about the grudge match, the women's grudge match. We got Sol Ruca taking on Zarya. And oh boy, WWE really thought in NXT, this is one of those Chef Michaels missteps. They really thought that the crowd was going to get behind Sol Ruca and how mean Zarya was to her. And what did the crowd do? Oh boy, they treat Sol Ruca like the mean girl and they pop for Zarya. I knew that was going to happen because the NXT crowd, and I hate using this term, but we're going to use it because it's the term that's out there, as a very smart crowd. A lot of indie wrestling fans are in that NXT crowd, myself included, yourself included. And when one thing about indie wrestling fans is when you tell us we're supposed to boo somebody, we are going to cheer that person and we're going to boo whoever you're shoving down our throats. And Sol Ruca, unfortunately for her, is the target of the NXT / indie wrestling fan, IWC, if you will, outrage, throwing a monkey wrench into all this. Now, granted, you can do something really good here and steer into it and make Sol Ruca a tremendous heel, because I think she has the capabilities of being a tremendous heel. Is that what's going to happen here? I think so. I think Sol Ruca is going to cheat to win. She's going to rob Zarya one more time, and then she's going to get on that microphone on Tuesday and say, I don't give a damn what you think, and I definitely don't give a damn what Zarya thinks. I don't care if you think I cheated to win. I absolutely did, and I will cheat her over and over again because I'm better than her, and you know it. Yes, that's right. Steal MJF's line. Don't do it. Really, don't steal MJF's line.
No, don't do that. Come up with something else.
Yes, come up with something different. I'm just being a smartass. Sammy, who's winning? Who's walking out as the winner of the grudge match?
You know, it's funny, because it's just a great example of wrestling. Because if this happened on the main roster with Sol Ruca, it would go completely different. You know what I mean? It would go completely different. But because it's NXT and because it's more of that indie feel and that indie crowd, it's exactly what happens. And I think it works out well, because I think they wanted, part of the team would have wanted Sol Ruca to win anyway, but they're like, no, she would get more and losing, blah blah blah. But she's going to win this match, and I think you're right. She might get a little bit of a heel run, and it, not that she's in any way needs refreshing, but it's kind of something she should do before she makes a main roster run and really see what she really, not just so much what she can do. I think she can do either, but just give her that experience of doing both. That way, when she is up on the main roster, because I do feel like she will be on the main roster before the end of the year. Just a complete package, an absolute complete package. So Sol Ruca winning and maybe a little bit of a heel run. Why not? It'd be fun.
I love it. I love it. Next up, women's NXT North American Championship. Your champion, Tatum Paxley, going up against former champion Blake Monroe. Blake does no wrong as far as the WWE brass is concerned, and I have to agree. When people thought it was a misstep for her to come to WWE, I think she proved why it wasn't a misstep. I think that they have allowed her to get over and do what she does and does best. And that is be the mean girl, but also the mean girl that's tough as hell and can get the job done in the ring. On the other hand, we have the very sympathetic Tatum Paxley, who I have enjoyed immensely. I think she's grown as a performer. I think she's grown as a character. She has left behind that clingy, well, still there a little bit, but she's left behind that, that Bayley clinginess. And I say Bayley because remember the hugger, if you will. She's left that behind and found more of an edge, and I like it. And I think it's done very, 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 very well. I'm not getting to go first here. This is you. Who is walking out of St. Louis, the women's NXT North American champion?
I think Blake wins here. I think it's time for her to get a belt again, and yeah, I think it's a Blake's time.
I am going to buy into the hype on the internet for once. I think Tatum Paxley, and still, because I think Blake Monroe goes to the main roster directly after WrestleMania, whether that's the Raw after Mania or if it's the SmackDown after Mania. I think that she's done enough at this point in juncture that the brass want to move her up. I think that there's going to be a lot of reshuffling because obviously there's been some failed experiments. I'm not going to go into details. And I think that there's going to be some reshuffling. And I think that a big reshuffle would be moving up a character that is so dynamic. I think that they have a lack of real convincing female heels on the main roster. Blake Monroe gives you that. Blake Monroe gives you exactly what you need right now. A feud between her and Tiffany Stratton's a dream match. Because opposite sides of the coin. Even though we know Tiffany can be a heel, but she's currently a face and she's currently over. You know what I mean? I think that could be, I'm not saying that that's going to be the first feud. I just think that that's one that you can build towards. But think about it. You can put Blake Monroe in there. We know she's had matches in the past with Stephanie Vakir. She's had matches in the past with Jordan Grace, like in different companies.
In different companies.
She's had matches with a lot. Yeah. So you have the built-in, and you, like I said, I think they need a heel. So I think that they're going to go with Tatum Paxley still and bring up Blake Monroe after Mania, just because it'll fill a need. And it is a pretty big need right now in the women's division, because you have right now his heels, you have the Irresistible Forces, and you have Asuka, and then that's it.
Yeah.
and Jade only by not by being a heel, if you will. We'll talk about that later. I'm leaving that off the table.
Well, Becky's a heel.
True, but Becky's also that gray area heel that we talk about with Randy Orton too. Because no matter what Becky does, she's going to get popped by part of the crowd. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like they'll boo her because of her actions, and she's good at that. Same as Randy Orton, but you're still going to have a part of the crowd pop when you hear that music. Because think about it, when her music hits, there's a pop. It's not an audible boo until she starts walking out. Everybody's excited to see the man because it's the man. She's going to always be over. She has her gimmick really has the female Stone Cold, and not in a bad way. I'm not downplaying it. I just think about it. That's just saying she's over. She is over. Let's go on. We got 2 matches left, and both of them are for world championships. We have the triple threat match for the NXT Women's Championship. Your champion, JC Jane, taking on Kendall Gray and Lola Vice. And oh boy, Sammy. I am tired of forcing Lola Vice down people's throats. I'm sorry, I am. I get it.
Got that fatigue, huh?
Listen, she's beautiful. I get it. She was an MMA fighter, so she's a legit badass. I get it. She's dating Damian Priest. I get it. Right? I get it. But good Lord, how much more? Like this is like Roman Reigns when we were booing him levels of down your throat. I hated how they finished that match on the last PLE with the underground match. I thought that was just super disrespectful for a super over worker, which is what it is. And I fear that she's going to walk out as the NXT champion. Just throwing it out there. So there it is. That's my problems. That's my complaints. And my pick is Lola Vice because, like a dog to vomit, Chef Michaels needs, what Chef Michaels needs. And we're going to leave it at that. You might be able to comment more because you are a lady.
I could, but I would just be adding on to what you said because I'm with you on that. I feel like we're just going to keep getting this. And, well, not this. I think this will be the end of this in particular. But, yeah, I think we're more of Lola, which, again, she's talented, but it's I don't know. It's time. It's time for some roster reshuffling, and we're at that time. We're almost at that time of year. It's really time for it. Time for some NXT people to move up. We're starting to see some main roster guys, Johnny Gargano, moving down, and some. It's time. It's time for some shaking up of things.
I will say one positive before we move on. One positive is much like what I said about Blake Monroe. You can say the same thing about JC Jane. So if she is no longer champion, moving her to the main roster becomes a legitimate possibility. And
you're
she is
predicting
also
some
a
big
tremendous
layoffs this year.
I don't think she's going anywhere. Honestly, JC Jane.
Oh,
well, yeah.
Other people got to go for these guys to get enough
failed
TV
experiments. I said failed experiments. I'm not going into details yet. We'll worry about that after Mania. There's been some failed experiments.
That's an FLZ after. That's an FLZ after hours conversation.
That's right. That is right. There will be some future endeavors. Let's be honest. But I'm going to say this. JC Jane, the one positive, if JC Jane loses, it could mean her coming up. And all the things I said about Blake Monroe, I could say about JC Jane. And JC Jane is definitely one of those people who surprised me. I never thought she would be on the run she's on, but kudos to her for working her ass off and becoming one hell of a heel and becoming one hell of a character. And hell, we've seen her even do like a light baby face work too. And she's good at what she does. And so kudos to JC Jane for all this. And I think just the silver lining is if she does lose the Lola Vice, we get to see her on the main roster. And I think she deserves it. So there you go. Let's talk about the main event of the evening for the NXT Championship. And it will be a fatal 4-way. That means one fall to the finish. Your champion and the man that we all believe in, Joe Hendry. He will be challenged by Ricky Saints All Ego, Ethan Page, and Tony D'Angelo. One of these four men will walk out of St. Louis, your NXT champion. Sammy, you're in the hot seat first. Who's leaving? Stand and deliver. The NXT champion.
Ethan Page. Ethan Page.
Wow.
Ethan Page, because it makes for fun storytelling. It's Ethan Page. As much as it would be cool to see Tony D win it, but no, it's Ethan Page.
Listen, I'm going with Ego. Only because I'm a huge Ego fan. But I'm going with Ego. And the reason why is I'm with you. I think there's more stories there. However, Ego is one of those people that have been talked about going to the main roster post-Mania. So a loss here could be a silver lining. They do need that spot filled. I'm not comparing him to The Miz like a lot of people do, but there is a need for a Miz-esque character in All Ego. Ethan Page fits that like a glove. I know people throw terms around, but great hand in the ring, very entertaining, can do, believe it or not, both sides. I know we see him mostly as a heel, but he can wrestle as a face as well. So whatever you need, and he's a workhorse. So there is a possibility. So if he doesn't win here, I could see that being the reason why. But I think if you're telling stories and we want to move things around on the show, definitely that, because I think Joe Hendry is going to go up to the main roster. I think Danhausen and not just because I'm wearing the shirt, not just because you have the mask. I think Danhausen has really shown that we can have an entertaining wrestler who makes a lot of money on the main roster. It doesn't necessarily need to be in the main event. It doesn't necessarily have to even be in matches. Joe Hendry could do that on the other brand. They have 2 shows. And I don't think SmackDown has a Danhausen. And I'm not saying that Joe Hendry is Danhausen. I'm just saying he's so entertaining and over, he's going to sell a metric ton worth of merchandise like Danhausen does.
Well, and not to drift too far away, but WWE has done a lot of seriousness over the past few years, and that's why we love R-Truth, because R-Truth would help break through that, and other guys would as well. But like, they were more of that comedy first, and we've seen a little bit of that with Joe Hendry, especially in NXT, but we've seen a little bit of on the main roster, and Danhausen. I mean, we have to have a conversation about when is Danhausen going to have a match, because he doesn't need. I'm not saying he needs one, but I'm like,
doesn't need one.
Doesn't need one, but at some point, obviously, you have to go down that route. He's going to have to get in the ring, and it's like, when? It could be months. It could be SummerSlam.
It could be longer.
But yes,
as a matter of fact,
right?
You can build it to a fever pitch.
It could be Survivor Series to make more sense for the character.
Right, but think about it. You could build that to a fever pitch. When's the last time we've had a wrestler where you can actually say that their first match you can build to a fever pitch because he's over enough, or she, and because we could be either or, is over enough that they don't have to wrestle.
Sting had an established career before.
Sting already has an established career,
right? So that doesn't really work.
About Chris Jericho, but Chris Jericho has an established career. And I'm not saying that Danhausen's a nobody, but Danhausen has not been on the major focal point as he is now prior to this, and without going to NXT. So I just think that they figured out, listen, that comedy selling stuff role is a big part of wrestling that has been missing. And I understand R-Truth has been there, but and that's why is fitting. But also, let's be honest, and this is nothing against Ron Killings, because I love R-Truth. He's also how many more years does he have left? You need to start getting that pipeline. And perfect example, look at Santino Marella. Santino Marella did an amazing job. Like, nobody did comedy wrestling like Santino Marella. And still to this day, he still makes all the money with the Cobra.
And Santino was a legitimate badass.
He's a shooter. He's a legit shooter. Like, he's a legit badass. And just comes out there and does comedy.
So anyway, back to NXT though. I agree with you on that. I think Ego wins because it's going to help NXT storylines, but I also agree. I don't feel he should have to do that, but I feel like they might feel like they need to have him do that because of just everything that's been going on the men's division in NXT for a while. It's still just not there, and a lot of that's because of call-ups. A lot of guys left, over a short period of time, and I don't think it's punishment to All Ego. I think if he has to stay down there another 6 months and he comes up later in the year, he's going to be a staple on that main roster. He's an amazing talent.
Absolutely. And I think we can both agree this upcoming Saturday, NXT Stand and Deliver will deliver like it does each and every year. They moved it off of the WrestleMania weekend because they were tired of it overshining parts of WrestleMania. I said it. I said the quiet thing out loud, and we all know it, because let's be honest, all of us would watch Stand and Deliver before Mania and then watch Mania and go like, hey, there's some of the matches on this card that got dominated by the NXT talent. So basing it out was kind of smart. Gotta give them credit. Kind of smart. With that being said, though, that's going to bring us to the end of this week's edition of 607 TWS, the wrestling show. Thank you for tuning in live. If you're watching on replay, thank you also for tuning in. We always enjoy it. Make sure you're leaving comments in chat, because we always love to hear from you. And of course, make sure you head over to the place that powers all of this. That's right. QR code above, fanlightzone.com. Check out all we have going over there and support the revolution that is fanlightzone.com, as well as make sure you head on over to all of our social media. Well, fanlightzone.com has them all there, so you can go there and follow us on all of them, but make sure you're following us on all the social media so you can check out all the great stuff we're doing, including Ken M when he live I used to say live tweets, but he does it across a bunch of social medias talking about wrestling when we're watching it live, and I guarantee he'll be doing some of that on Saturday for Stand and Deliver. And of course, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you're watching us on YouTube, you're already here, so make sure you just hit that subscribe button, hit the bell icon for notification, and hit that thumbs up to show that you like the video and help us with the algorithm. If you're not over on YouTube already, after this video, go on over and make sure you do all of that. Sammy, we've said a lot, but now that we've come to the end, it's time to bid adieu. Until next week, when we come to you in living color and in full stereo audio. It is for myself and Sammy. Tune in next Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, when we talk about what we thought of NXT Stand and Deliver. Also, the preview of AEW Dynasty and more. So until then, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and most importantly, later wrestling fans.